Hold on, folks. You are going to enjoy this podcast. You've all been talking about it. It's been smeared all over social media. It's one of the hottest topics among Georgia coon hunters that I've seen since I've been on social media. Georgia just passed a law that is going to allow the year-round take of raccoons. I think possums is included in that. We don't pay a whole lot of attention to possums, but definitely raccoons. There's a lot of different opinions on how this is going to affect coon hunting in Georgia. And I've got Mike Worley with the Georgia Wildlife Federation. He is going to lay it out for you, tell you how it all came about. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the issue from the coon hunter's perspective. You are really going to enjoy this episode of the Houndsman XP podcast. And even if you're not from Georgia, you're going to want to listen to this because Mike Worley is an interesting guy, and he gives us some insight, maybe a message that stresses the importance of why we have to be involved and how we can be influencers when it comes to making fish and wildlife regulations in our own states. So there are a lot of takeaways here for you. I fully expect that Mike Worley will become a regular guest on the Houndsman XP podcast as we continue to bring you the best information on how to preserve, protect, and promote the lifestyle that we all love so much, and that is free casting hounds. I want to share something else with you, though. Today, while I was out just doing some rucking, I had a pack on and just walking around my property here and trying to stay in shape during this off season. I had a pup with me, a little Yog Terrier pup, the Terrorist, the Krieger, the Warrior. He's insane. But anyway, I had this pup with me, and I was out walking, and one of the pieces of gear I had with me was the Hiker Light Leash from Dogs Are Treed. Krieger was just free casting, and this old dude will hunt. At 4 months old, he's got as much drive as any dog I have seen. And I keep the Hiker Light with me so that if he does get himself in trouble, which he does not have an off switch at this age. So I need to leash him up and lead him away from some of this stuff. The Hiker Light is perfect for that. It weighs ounces. I don't even know that I've got it with me, and it's always there when I need it. Check out Dogs Are Treed at dogsaretreed.com, and at checkout, use that promo code HXP, 20% off, and you get 20% off of your entire order. Also, check out Rough Cut Company at roughcutcompany.com. They're going to take your high-quality images. You're going to upload them to their website. They're going to return that image laser engraved into a piece of native Wisconsin hardwood. It's going to be a keepsake that you'll want to pass down. And you can use our promo code HXP 10% off at roughcutcompany.com. 10% off your order. Check them out. The Old South Dog Box is about to come apart. It's a box shaker. We got Mike Worley in the chute, and he's ready to talk to you. Let's get the tailgate down and the doors open on the Old South Dog Box. It's time to dump the box. So, hey, Mike, I apologize for my dyslexia there on getting this invite sent out. For some reason, I think it's because I'm thinking Georgia Fish and Wildlife instead of Georgia Wildlife Federation.
No worries.
Yeah. Well, Mike, I appreciate you being on the Houndsman XP podcast this morning and taking time out of your busy day. You guys just ripped off a busy legislative session, I know. And you glad that's over? You kind of taking a little breather?
Oh my gosh. I don't know about taking a breather, but catching up a little bit. That's really what we're doing around here right now. The legislature was fast and furious, as it always is.
Yeah. Well, I just want to let's start out by talking about Georgia Wildlife Federation and your organization, what you guys do. We'll spend a few minutes on that, get everybody introduced to you. And then we got some good topics to talk about today.
Fantastic. Well, Chris, thanks for having me on. And Georgia Wildlife Federation is Georgia's oldest member-supported conservation organization. We've been around since 1936. So we're a independent affiliate of the National Wildlife Federation. So I sometimes in the history lesson, I go back and say when President Roosevelt called all the hunting and fishing clubs to the D.C. to address the challenges with the uh, uh, wildlife crisis of the early 1900s, where we were out of deer. Deer were in trouble, turkey were in trouble, all of our game species were in trouble, and called the hunting and fishing groups together. They all went to D.C. and they formed the National Wildlife Federation. They started the tradition of doing what we call the North American, where all the wildlife professionals from across the country get together annually for an annual conference to talk about issues. And then those folks went back often to their home states and formed uh, uh, independent organizations or affiliates to work on wildlife and hunting and fishing issues back in their states. And that's what Georgia Wildlife Federation was. So National Wildlife Federation was formed in February of 36. We were formed in December of 36 by the same people.
So is it like the kind of set up similar to, well, these organizations are probably set up similar to the National Wildlife Federation, but when you look at the National Wild Turkey Federation or RMEF or NRA, you've got the national organization, and then you've got your state affiliates or even local affiliate clubs.
Yeah, a little bit. They're similar in that we have state affiliates and a national organization, but the difference is that we all operate as completely separate entities on the state level. So Georgia Wildlife Federation, we have our own board of directors. We set our own policies. We join with National Wildlife Federation when their issues make sense to us, and we don't join with them when they don't make sense to us. So we operate completely independently of them. Though what we do gain from them is a voice where we can gather together and make sportsmen's voices heard at the U.S. Capitol. We're really strong here working with our state legislature, but at the federal level, obviously there are 50 states out there, and so it's much more effective to join together as a group to be able to impact federal legislation, similar to what we're working. One of the big issues we're working on right now at the federal level is the Recovering America's Wildlife Act, and so it'll be sort of the third stool of our conservation funding. Sportsmen and anglers have been funding wildlife recovery, game species recovery,
right,
from Robertson since the 1937, which was one of our first issues that we worked on. And then in the 60s, we had the Dingell-Johnson Act passed, which is a similar thing for sport fish.
Right.
That leaves everything else sort of uncovered. In the Recovering America's Wildlife Act, which is proposed this year, is the issue that we're working on at the federal level to kind of get some dedicated funding specifically for everything else. So habitat issues and all the other things that go along with supporting our great outdoors. So that's one of the big federal issues. So Georgia Wildlife Federation is an independent affiliate. We were founded by hunters and anglers.
Right.
It's still it's sort of foundational to who we are, but we also through the years have expanded to include a lot more broader conservation issues and missions. But one of the things I always like to point out to a lot of our friends is we are really focused on the science associated with all the wildlife work that we do. So we have as my 30-second elevator speech, or 1 sentence elevator speech, is Georgia Wildlife Federation is the advocate for professional science-based management of our wildlife and our natural resources.
That is exactly the message that I wanted to bring home on this thing. And we're going to take a deeper dive on a few things, but science-based management is what saved mountain lion hunting in Colorado this year. It's what has gone to bat for us time and time again in places like Arizona, and I mean, just all across the United States. Vermont just had a big win up there for hunters and especially houndsmen. So our crowd is becoming more and more engaged in the value of that science-based wildlife and combating the emotional-based policy making and things like that. But we're not immune from it. So tell me why. And you and I got together because of some specific issues that you're working on in Georgia that directly affect houndsmen in the state of Georgia. You want to run through those real quick and give us an update on where we're at with them?
Sure. One of our big issues, or I say it's a big issue. I think this was a year in our Georgia General Assembly that where we didn't really have any what I would think of as really great, big, monumental pieces of legislation that affect hunting and fishing. But one of the issues that sort of brought about a fair amount of discussion, let's say, among particularly among our sporting community, was a bill proposed that would allow for hunting and fishing. Hunting and trapping of raccoons and possums year round. And the purpose of that was, we all know that those two are nest predators, and turkey hunting is a big issue here in Georgia.
Yes, it is
across the country, and we all love to get out and do it. It's been like 5 days since I was in the turkey woods, so I'm a passionate turkey hunter, and so. Obviously, those two are nest predators. Obviously, they're important to houndsmen and the traditions of raccoon hunting here in our state. But the challenges associated with with year-round hunting are more optics than they are, the facts and the science. Science we really don't have any science that shows that hunting these animals year round would be effective at controlling their populations. Quite frankly, there's a lot of theories out there that our populations are being enhanced because we're putting so much feed in the woods with deer feeders and all that kind of stuff. So so we're on one hand promoting the presence of these predators, and on the other hand trying to figure out how to control them. But so we're also the state's R3 coordinator, recruiting, retaining, and reactivating people to hunting. And so one of the issues that we face with our people that we're trying to recruit to hunting today is new hunters are extremely interested in a couple of issues.
Before we get to the access issue, because I think that's probably where you're going.
Yeah.
Am I right? All right.
A couple of things. One of the reasons why we've had a challenge with this raccoon bill is the optics of it. And so these folks that we're interested in bringing, we want to see them. They're here because they want to come in because of the ethics of it, and they also want to come in because of the locally sourced food and that kind of thing. So lots of reasons. But
when you go out raccoon hunting, I've found over the years that it is a perfect, anything you can do with a dog, whether it's coon hunting or squirrel hunting with dogs or whatever it is, rabbit hunting, bird hunting, it's a great gateway for the new sportsman to get involved in the activity of hunting. Especially kids. It's hard for kids to go out and spend. I've raised 3. I know what it's like. You get them out in the deer stand. You do all this front end work to get everything set up, and you really want to be successful. And you're out there for a half an hour, and then it starts. I'm hungry. I'm cold. This is boring. But when you're out there with dogs and kids can skip rocks in the creek and they can veer off and go chase whatever, it's a great gateway. Nobody has to be quiet. There isn't some kind of code of ethics for, silence and stealth, for houndsmen. So it's a great gateway. So I want to nail down though, what was the work you were doing on this particular bill that was going to enhance raccoon hunting opportunities in the state? What kind of feedback were you getting from the houndsmen, and you were trying to navigate this whole thing through legislator?
Yeah, and by the way, I am a huge fan of. I'm a duck hunter with a lab that is when she's not able to go with me. She got hurt at the end of the season. She wasn't able to go hunting with me. It really detracts from my having a good
Mm-hmm.
time in a duck blind without having my dog there with me. So
Me too.
we can talk further about that later. But yeah, so we count on the voice of sportsmen.
Mm-hmm.
We count on the voice of people. We run something called the Camo Coalition. As a matter of fact, it's a direct advocacy work, and you can if you are interested or anybody's interested, you can go to our website at gwf.com, gwf.org. I'm sorry, Georgia Wildlife Federation.org, and you can join Camo Coalition for free. And what it does is it analyzes every bill that comes through the legislature. And when we have specific issues that we need sportsmen to engage on with their legislators, it gives you an easy task to
Okay.
plug in and click and join. And the
I
reason
want to put an exclamation point on that because we'll have people from Georgia. I've got several listeners from Georgia. That is, go to gwf.org and join the Camo Coalition.
that's correct.
Yeah. So it'll give you updates on all the bills coming out. That'd be a good place for us too, because we try to track those bills as well. Good stuff.
And you can, and so it gives, and you'll be able to look at it. It gives both the legal language in the bill. You can see the actual legislation. But we also do a quick little summary of what it actually means for folks.
Right.
And then I encourage folks. We're pretty independent folks when you come to hunters.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can actually have disagreements on our issues among ourselves. And so I encourage folks that even if you don't agree with us on a particular issue, stay engaged with Camo Coalition. If we send you a notice out that says contact your legislator about this, and this is what we recommend, and you don't agree with it, I actually encourage people to change the note and to send it to their legislator anyway, even in opposition, because 99% of the time we're all going to agree. And even when we don't, our voices are critical. We're in a world today where, hunters are only about 9% of the population here in Georgia. I'm not sure what the number is across the country, but I do know here in Georgia.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of our population supports hunting, and so we're not in a place where people are wanting to shut us down or anything like that. But we have to be thoughtful about that issue always. When you think about the fact that we're only 9% of the population,
right?
Folks could very easily overwhelm us. We could be taken under by a tidal wave of non-hunting if we're not careful.
That's the battleground segment of our population, is that non-hunter, not the anti-hunter, the non-hunter. That's the battleground. We're both fighting. The anti-hunting crowd and the pro-hunting crowd are both fighting for that percentage of the population that supports hunting or is indifferent to it, but they can see value to it. So.
And it's the largest part of the population by far.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
9%, you'd be looking at 82% of Georgia population being, non-hunting.
Right. That's correct. So, that's one of the things that we really encourage folks. Stay engaged, even if you don't always agree with us. And we work hand in glove with our agency on a day-to-day basis. But we disagree with them on occasions. And when we do, it's okay. Like I said, we probably agree 98, 99% of the time. Heck, I don't even agree with my wife that often. So, these issues bring us together. But one of the things I find is that sportsmen sometimes they don't want to get engaged. They think there's something wrong about politics, and they think there's something wrong about talking to their legislators about specific votes and things like that. Folks, we better stay engaged. It's one of those issues that I'm adamant about. We don't stay engaged. There's an old saying among lobbyists, and I've been engaged in lobbying for most of my adult life, for 35 years or thereabouts. There's an old saying that if you're not if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Wow. That's a good line. I like that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's break down this bill about raccoon hunting. Basically, what was the proposed legislation? First of all, did it pass or did it not pass?
It did pass.
Okay, so we are going to year-round raccoon and possum hunting and trapping in Georgia.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. And break that down for us. What are some of the nuances of that bill that our listeners should understand to be able to deal with it or cope with it or whatever?
Yeah. So this will be law. The state, the Department of Natural Resources board, so the DNR board will have to they'll have to put together some regulations. Obviously, this will be the only game animal that you can hunt 365 days a year. These two, you can, here in Georgia, you can shoot coyotes year round. You can shoot hogs year round, any of our non-native species, but these are our only game animals that'll be allowed to be able to hunt year round. And no limit on them. So for houndsmen in particular, just as there are differences in the folks that hunt deer, there are differences in houndsmen in the way that they hunt raccoons. Some are no kill. They tree them and pull their dogs off and go on about and try and tree another one that same night, or another 5 or another 10 that same night. Some are killed, and all are fine, but everybody operates differently. So this.
What are some of the pushbacks you were getting from houndsmen about this bill? Because there was some opposition. I've seen it on social media. What was some of the oppositions that the Wildlife Federation received about this bill?
So some of the things that we receive, obviously, there's no research at all to support that year-round hunting will reduce the populations of raccoons and possums. So we got a challenge there. A lot of folks were saying we really, we like to have. Georgia can be a pretty hot and humid place in the summertime.
Right.
Kind of tough to run your dogs in the woods in the summertime with all the heat, the humidity, the mosquitoes, the snakes that are out, all of that kind of thing. So
right.
A lot of folks are saying, this isn't a bill that we're even going to engage with. The challenge we face is the optics. All these folks that are out there, that we've already seen some of the anti-hunting crowd putting up Facebook messages, holding a baby raccoon or a baby possum in their hand, saying House Bill 1147 will create these orphans.
Right.
And so what we've done for very minimal, if any, benefit to hunting or the outdoors, we've given the anti-hunting crowd a pretty big hammer to beat us with.
Yeah. So from what I've gathered, just in my limited tracking of this thing, I think some of the fear, I mean, if you're gonna hunt raccoons in South Georgia in those swamps and things like that, it would be, and I've hunted down in the Albany area pretty extensively. The ability to hunt the raccoon out of that habitat is virtually impossible. With just the landscape barriers, the swamps and just that part of it, the raccoon is going to survive. I think most of the fear comes from northern Georgia. The houndsmen that were opposing this is the fear that people from Eastern Tennessee and South Carolina and stuff would come into the mountainous area of Georgia to raccoon hunt, where the raccoon population is pretty low anyway. And that's their biggest opposition to it, from what I gather. Was that the same thing you were hearing?
Yeah, those are great points. And the reality is we haven't studied it, so we don't really know. So when I talk about the fact that we are a science-based group, there's no science that supports or opposes it. To be honest with you,
Right.
This is sort of taking a tack that we've not done before of allowing year-round hunting of a game animal. But from a common sense perspective,
I was going to go there, but we're talking about science-based, and now we're talking about common sense. Go ahead.
Yeah, but from a common sense perspective, it makes a lot of sense. The reality is, for most of these kind of species, these are called mesopredators, sort of a mid-level predator. The reality is that hunting pressure, oftentimes, for turkeys, hunting pressure may have some impact, because there's so many turkey hunters out there. But for raccoons, opossums, there's a real challenge that whether hunting can significantly impact the population. Now, trapping can, but it has to be very intensive trapping. So when
you're a wildlife biologist
I'm a biologist by training. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And so we've got our PhD wildlife biologists on staff here. We've got it's who we are. So when we get out and we start talking about things like trapping, so intensive trapping can and is very effective at controlling these predators. And when I say that, we've got quail plantations in South Georgia,
right,
where or lands that people are managing very aggressively and intensively for turkeys, even here in North Georgia. And they can easily go to the DNR and get a permit to trap. And normally what they'll do is trap during the nesting season, to control these kind of predators.
Right.
So you'll have a very intensive trapping time of about 3 or 4 weeks. You can drive down that population on a specific piece of property with daily intensive trapping, no question.
And that's something that was already in place prior to this bill. There was already a vehicle for landowners who are trying to do a management to get that permit to engage in intensive trapping.
That's correct.
Okay.
So that's always been there. There's no standards on the plan. If you literally write out of 2 paragraphs that say Georgia Department of Natural Resources, my name is Mike Worley. I'm managing 300 acres of property for turkey hunting, and I'd like to have a permit to trap raccoons and possums, or to run a trap line to trap predators. They'll give you a permit, no questions asked. You can go out and run your traps every day. The challenges with trapping is that it is, if you hire someone to do it, it's very expensive. And if you do it yourself, it is really hard, because to trap enough, you got to put a bunch of traps out, and you got to run those traps every day.
So there's a time investment and a financial investment for that person. I think the biggest rub with houndsmen, with our coon hunters, is we don't want turkey hunters killing our raccoons. The biggest, and this will tie into the thing you started down the road on a minute ago, was if turkey hunters would simply allow coon hunters to come on the property, these properties that are being managed for other game species, and allow us to hunt those areas, we could help them with their problems. But they don't want us there. But then they want to manage the population. To me, if there was already a system in place to do a management effort on those properties, why do we need to take it a step farther and make more law?
Chris, I can't agree with you more. Would you like to come down and join me and be and testify at the next committee hearing at the legislature?
I'd love to. Yes. Yeah, I've done that kind of work here in Indiana as well. But I really do. I think that's the biggest rub, is coon hunters and houndsmen don't want people shooting our game animals any more than a deer hunter wants a coon hunter shooting his deer, at night. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is, are you done with that part?
I am as done as you want me. If you want more information, my problem is I can talk about any of these subjects until people are just flat sick of them. So,
well, I hear you, and I do too. I get accused of the same thing, Mike. Here's I think I was an advocate there. Now I'm going to be the antagonist a little bit.
sure.
Indiana, about 10 years ago, passed something similar. Our stipulation is you have to have written permission from the landowner to take or trap raccoons. And simply, there aren't enough people out there that are actively engaged in coon hunting to even really move the needle on this thing.
Right.
We haven't seen any decrease in our raccoon population. In fact, I think you would, and again, it's just based on my perception. Our raccoon numbers are at an all-time high. We've been going through this for 10 years. And one of the things that I really do want to talk about, and this is a point that I've seen firsthand here in Indiana, is if we don't manage the population, then the bureaucrats will step in and give direction and manage it for us. And we've seen it with deer. We've seen it with and the thing is, when we were trying to do some work on the raccoon season here in Indiana through our organization, the fur biologist flat told us, he went through the numbers with us of where we're at. And we tried to say, we're not going to kill that. Our justification for expanding the season is we're not going to destroy the population because we don't kill that many anyway. You can't tree a dead raccoon.
Right.
And the biologist flat looked at us and he goes, you need to be killing more. You really do. Our population is at a level that if you don't, either we're going to lose them to disease, or the bureaucrats are going to step in and do something drastic to reduce this number. We've got ag complaints, we've got landowner complaints, we've got homeowner complaints and subdivisions. I mean, that's the biggest thing that we worked on the last 10 years was the human wildlife conflict aspect of this whole thing. Before I retired, is we spent a lot of time answering these wildlife complaints. Our biologists get sick of it. They get bogged down with it. So as hunters, we have to understand that it's okay to pull the trigger. At times, regionally what your population is, and you can kind of gauge that. If you, as houndsmen, I know we hunt a lot of the same areas time after time. And we know those places that it's pretty tough to tree a raccoon. So you probably don't want to pull the trigger there. But if you're down here at, Farmer John's place around his cornfield and you're treeing raccoons every 100 yards, it's not going to hurt to pull the trigger there.
Right.
So that's my take on it is I being the antagonist, I don't think it's going to be the big boogeyman that everybody wants it to be. I still think that the biggest rub with the whole thing is turkey hunters get to kill my raccoons.
The reality here, and just Chris, oftentimes what we don't think of is the big picture as hunters. So
right.
I love to duck hunt. But I started my first hunting experience was squirrel hunting with my dad when I was a kid, and then from there we also quail hunted. So we had bird dogs and out quail hunting. We don't have wild quail much anymore here in Georgia. So, it's a lot of plantation hunting and that kind of thing. But oftentimes we forget that it's not just about that species we're hunting. Mm-hmm. So let me sort of build a picture, a big picture here. So we passed the authorization now to allow deer hunting over bait about 3 years ago. Well, what's happened here is that we're putting enormous amounts of corn out on the landscape,
mm-hmm. Which costs money.
But what it also does is, it feeds your deer, but it also feeds your hogs. It also feeds your raccoons. Mm-hmm. It makes life easier for raccoons and hogs. So if life gets easier for these what some folks would think of as non-desirable species, they reproduce more and they live longer. Right. So you have more hogs and you have more raccoons simply by changing the law and allowing or encouraging hunting over bait.
Right.
And so it's one of those unintended consequences. And oftentimes we don't think about that in the big picture as hunters. And
Yeah.
so, and so, and I completely agree with you. Also, is that we have to encourage folks to pull the trigger more often. When we were having the debate about the deer hunting and deer baiting, and I had a land manager talking to me about he was managing about 3,000 acres for a family. It said, we need to be able to take more deer off the land, and so allowing us to bait would make it easier. Shoot over bait would make it easier. And I asked him, I said, okay, so how many people are hunting on this land? He said, well, it's the landowner and his kids.
Right.
And 3,000 acres, landowner and his kids. And I said, so how many deer are they taking? Well, they're trying to only take a couple of big bucks, every year off the land. We're in a state that has 1.3 million deer. We're in a state where we have so many deer. Our limits, you can take 2 antlered deer and 10 unantlered deer a year.
Right.
And I told him, you don't need more corn on the ground. You need more lead in the air. And that actually is that's the reality, is that we need to on occasion pull the trigger.
Yeah, for sure. We saw the same thing here in Indiana with the deer hunting crowd, and we as houndsmen at times, we'll get into this in a minute, but about why we need to be involved. But it just seems like deer hunters get their way about everything that they want. We need to kill more deer, so we're going to kill more deer. We need corn on the ground, and we're not thinking about the fact that it's going to grow. I mean, raccoons the population is not hinging on habitat as much as it is on, they can find habitat anywhere.
Absolutely.
A raccoon will find a place to den in the eaves of your house underneath the soffit.
A raccoon is just as adaptable as a white-tailed deer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing special about habitat. They're living in downtown Atlanta, and they're going to be just fine in downtown Atlanta too. They just, they can live anywhere. But with the deer hunting crowd, it's like, seems from houndsman standpoint, it seems to us like everybody's only worried about killing inches of antler on the deer. And when I was still working, you'd go around and you'd talk to guys, and it was always a hot topic about our increase in the antlerless take and all this other stuff. They're killing the deer. We used to see 25 deer from the stand in a day, and now we're only seeing 5.
Yeah.
And so it became a deal where they were campaigning against the antlerless deal. It's like, guys, if you've got that many does and the bucks don't have to move around, you're not going to see them anyway. You want to take that doe herd off the landscape, make those bucks get out of their beds, travel more. You're going to have a better chance of killing them. And finally, they started realizing it, I think.
Yeah.
It's
interestingly enough, I mean, Chris, you understand this stuff. You've got the background to have these, to kind of look at it from a big picture perspective. So raccoons, opossums are mesopredators. They're sort of mid-level predators.
Yeah.
So in the world,
except to a quail and a turkey, except to a quail and a turkey, they're major predators.
They're major predators. That's right. But in the world that we've created, because we're here now, well, I mean, so it's not the world that they evolved in. They were apex predators.
Yeah.
That would keep their populations in check as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the populations of those mesopredators, there aren't those out in the landscape. We do have to have, I think, some hunters that are willing to take those shots.
Yeah.
To serve in that role, if you will, of helping to make sure that we're maintaining those populations appropriately.
I just wish that the state regulators would take into account that before you make a law to bait deer or kill more stuff or whatever, for our raccoons, that they put a stipulation in there before we pass this, then we have to see that you are allowing access from these user groups to get in there and help you manage your problem, help you solve your problem before we make more legislation to solve it for you. I hate it when government tries to solve our problems. If people, there is science out there about, and deer hunters, and I'm not trying to rant on deer hunters, but because I've tried to look at the big picture on things too, like you said, but deer hunters are their own worst enemy, and turkey hunters are too when it comes to this stuff. They think that a hound running across their property is going to somehow adversely affect their success of their hunt. And really what they need to realize is that they just need to be better hunters, that we're not the boogeyman that they think we are. But until that landowner makes the effort to resolve his own issue by allowing access, we're not passing any more special regulations for you.
Yeah. And look, I get the whole, when you say deer hunters get what they want, deer hunters are the 900-pound gorilla. I mean, if you look at who spends money, who buys hunting license, who
own property,
who lease property, somewhere around 60% of the revenue for our department comes from deer hunters.
Yep.
So look, I get it. And turkey hunters are passionate and they are numerous, and so those are your big species. The folks that are doing the houndsmen. So we certainly have some deer hunting with dogs. We have raccoon hunting. Everybody's doing quail hunting with dogs. Everybody's doing duck hunting with dogs. So I mean, dogs are critical components, and hounds are critical components of our hunting world. But we're not even the big voice. We're not the big voice within the hunting community either. And
right.
That's one of the other things we have to keep in mind.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. Here's your opportunity to tell people, if they're a houndsman, why they need to be involved with organizations like the Georgia Wildlife Federation, with their state hound organization. We're trying to operate way too much as individuals out here, and organization is very low among the working dog, and I'll just stick to houndsmen. So here's your opportunity to give people the speech about why you need to be involved.
As sportsmen, we all think of ourselves as that rugged individualist out there in the woods, and the person that can walk out there and take care of themselves, take care of business out in the woods, and we can. The reality is that we don't live in the wilderness anymore,
right?
And we live in a world that is driven by politics. We live in a world that is driven by laws and regulations.
Yeah.
And if we choose, and it's our choice, if we choose not to engage as a group, as individuals, we can be advocate. I can tell all of my buddies how great it is to go out and train my lab every day, and she can do fantastic blind retrieves, and she follows our hand signals and all that kind of stuff, and she's just awesome.
Yeah. You
know how much that means from a policy standpoint? It means absolutely nothing.
Right.
So if we are committed and we believe in and we continue to enjoy what we do for truthfully for pleasure, then we have to stay engaged, or those opportunities can be taken from us.
We're going to continue that conversation. I got to take a quick break for a sponsor, and we'll be right back, Mike. But we'll be addressing that and picking up right on the other side of this break.
Sounds great.
Hey, folks, Memorial Day is going to be here before you know it. What a great time to honor the sacrifice of the men and women of America's armed forces who have bought and paid for your freedom with their blood. You can honor that sacrifice by making a donation to Freedom Hunters. Go to freedomhunters.org and hit the donate button. You can also find that spot to do that on our website at houndsmanxp.com. And you can do your patriotic duty by getting a Gold Star family member out on a hound adventure through Freedom Hunter and Houndsman XP. Houndsmen, you're the most patriotic group of people I have ever been around. Let's pay it back. Let's pay it forward from field to field with Freedom Hunters. All right. And we're back with Mike Worley of the Georgia Wildlife Federation. We were discussing how to stay engaged. It's almost like you read my most recent article for Bear Hunting Magazine. I wrote an article called Independent to a Fault. And independence is something that a lot of coon hunters look for in their hounds. But as hunters, just to summarize that article real quick, we all want to be that rugged individual, that person who's independent, that can solve their own problems. But at the end of the day, we've got to know when we come off the mountain, out of the woods, to show up, to stay involved and stay aware of what's going on in the world. And one of my favorite sayings is, learners will inherit the earth while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists.
Yeah, that's right.
And you can be that rugged individual, but you're going to come out of the woods and realize that you are several steps behind preserving the lifestyle that you want to have.
Yep.
If you don't get involved.
I'm Mike Worley, President and CEO of Georgia Wildlife Federation. I'm a registered lobbyist. I go to the Capitol all the time during the state legislative session. I talk to legislators almost every day. Mm-hmm. Whether we're during the session or whether we're outside the session, I'm talking with legislators. The reality is, everybody looks to the Wildlife Federation to represent hunters and anglers at the Capitol, but it makes way more difference if I can convince one or two hunters to come to the Capitol and talk to that legislator instead of me talking to them. Mm-hmm. It makes a tremendous amount of difference. You talked about going down to Albany, Georgia. If I can get a hunter from Albany to come to the Capitol and speak at a Game Fish and Parks Committee hearing or a Senate Natural Resources and Environment hearing, their legislator is sitting on that committee.
Yeah.
And they listen to them because that person from Albany votes for them.
Right.
And it's a normal person making a comment, taking the time and the commitment to come to the Capitol. So folks, it can make such a huge difference.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I think a lot of times as sportsmen, we think, well, definitely join, get involved and pay your dues to your hound organization mm-hmm. and the Georgia Wildlife Federation, but don't send your money there and then like you're passing the buck. Okay, I paid my dues, now I expect you to go do the work for me. Find ways to be involved. Find ways, if you have to, make a phone call to your representative, write a letter, send an email, whatever it is. But there is no political clout to complaining about it on Facebook. You've got to make that personal contact, and don't just send your money expecting someone else to do all the heavy lifting for you. We've got to get involved at the level if we're really going to preserve our lifestyle.
When I go to the Capitol and I say I'm Mike Worley, I'm testifying at a committee hearing, and committee hearings are that's not where I do my most important work. Most of my important work happens outside of committee hearings. My members and my hunters make the biggest impact in those committee hearings.
Yeah.
But if I'm, as I like to say, if I can go down there and say, I'm Mike Worley, I represent 30,000 hunters and anglers in the state of Georgia, that means something. It mm-hmm. certainly does. But but for a person who is a member who has sent me a membership contribution. Now, I think that of those as hunters or anglers, that's an investment. But if you're going out and investing in, let's pick a stock. If you're going out and investing in Twitter stock like Elon Musk did over the last few days, you don't just put your money in there. You put your money into that stock market and you pay attention to those investments you've made. And you actually might even manage those investments a little bit as time goes by. So it's not, I appreciate and count on those investments, those folks sending that membership check, but it's just as important for the future that you also manage or stay engaged with that investment. And that's the encouragement I try to make with our hunters and anglers.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense, Chris?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but I can also say that some people, you just want their money and you don't want to be involved. I can tell you that. I'm not going to lie. It's like, man, do not do that. Yeah, but we do need everybody involved. That was a kind of a joke, but tongue in cheek as well.
I understand. So sometimes my friends are my biggest challenges. Yeah.
You bet. You bet. All right, let's talk about the biggest issue facing hunters in, I don't care where you go. You even have people in the Rocky Mountain states complaining about access these days. And there's big court hearings going on in Wyoming right now about an access issue. It's going on everywhere. But I don't mean to downgrade the problems they have out west, but there's so much public land out there that it is hard for people in the East to understand why people should care about that, because we fight that battle at a level every day. I don't know what Georgia's public land is, but we're like at 43 to 45% privately owned. Or no, I'm sorry, that is wrong. We are like 43 to 45 on the list. We are down at 45 on the availability of public land to hunt just in Indiana. So I think the percentage wise, it's like 90% of Indiana is privately held.
Georgia is 92% privately owned.
Mm-hmm.
And access, and we talk about research and we talk about stuff. And I mentioned earlier that we're the R3 coordinator for the state. So obviously, what's the barriers to entry for hunters? First off, they get confused by our regulations. Our regulations are way too complicated.
Mm-hmm.
But access is one of the primary barriers to people coming into hunting. And so, we talked about the 365 day a year hunting component of raccoons and possums.
Mm-hmm.
One of the amendments that happened at the last few days of the legislative session was that they removed public lands from that ability. So you cannot hunt raccoons and possums on public lands 365 days a year.
Indiana did the same thing when we passed ours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so those, because other folks are using those lands.
Mm-hmm.
The agency also needs to do some non-hunting season maintenance on those lands, roads and gates and burning. We do a lot of prescribed fire here in Georgia.
Yeah.
And so all of those things have to be done. And so there are, even though we talk about them being public lands, there are non-hunters that are using the lands that hunters have paid for when we don't have hunting season. And those lands are being also reserved or preserved for them as well.
Man, that's a whole topic for another podcast, Mike. I used to see our hunting public be restricted from use on public land, and then as I'm out patrolling and I go by this public land, there's that 1979 Impala sitting there. The person's never bought a hunting license. They've never been a fisherman. and they're out there free range. Use this land however you want to, pick berries, pick mushrooms, pick wildflowers, but we don't expect any investment from you at all. It's just here for you to use. But we're going to restrict the houndsmen from using it because they disturb wildlife habitat. Man, that drove me crazy. I'm telling you.
We did change some of that a few years ago. So we do require folks that are going to use our wildlife management areas do have to have either a hunting license, even if you're not hunting. You have to have a hunting license.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. Because there's been a big debate. Backpack taxes is a term that's used in the Western states. If you're going to be then you have to have a permit to be there. But my fear with just a blanket backpack tax, I love the hunting because then it goes into statistics for PR money.
Yep.
Instead of giving the non-consumptive user a seat at the table at that point. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It worries me that a backpack tax would overshadow the number of hunting license sales, and then you start skewing the PR money, which is used for management, habitat, and all those wildlife management issues, and boom, then what do you got? You got non-consumptive users with a seat at the table because politicians and bureaucrats look at money, and they are going to start giving them a larger voice to make decisions about how that property is used, about how you hunt there, about, the management of the wildlife.
Money is power, in bureaucracies, and money is power in political environments. That's just the way it is. That's why the most important committee assignments and committee chairs in a legislature are appropriations committees. They get to spend the money. It's a critical component, and it's something that we have to ensure that we continue to focus on as hunters and anglers, if we want to keep these traditions alive and keep those lands available to us.
Yes, absolutely. So, all right, I want to kind of wrap this up here with this conversation, and that is, I want to talk about the personnel. You work with Georgia wildlife managers all the time.
Every day.
And it disturbs me when I see blanket statements like Georgia Fish and Wildlife is anti-hunter, or those guys are not doing their jobs. We've talked about this a little bit off air, but when I see that, I want your experience from dealing with these guys. How concerned are they? How pro hunting are they? Are they really working for the sportsmen out there?
Our agency, I think, is very committed to serving the needs and the wants and the interests of our hunting population. Sometimes we might have a disagreement over the sort of the fringe parts, around the edges, but overall, our agency really does focus on and take into account what hunters and anglers want. They're managing a lot of our properties specifically for game animals, and so I will tell you though, as time goes by, and I'm speaking specifically of Georgia here. Mm-hmm. I have had some interactions with other states and their agencies, and I've seen some that are talking about they're trying to find funding models for their operations that don't include or that don't depend upon sportsmen.
California's really headed that direction.
Yeah, I think you're going to see that quite a bit along the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
Not just California, but north of there as well.
Right.
And so
it's where all the Californians go to get out of the city. And
that's
they turn into California.
Exactly. Yeah. But interesting enough, one of the things that we've noticed through the years also is that the folks that are coming in as wildlife biologists today oftentimes don't have a background as hunters. 20 years ago, wildlife biologists were hunters, and they still are, I think, in a large part, but not always. And so when I talk with the dean of the colleges that produce our wildlife professionals, they point blank say, what we see now are Discovery Channel biologists. These are people that develop their interest in the outdoors by watching Nat Geo and Discovery Channel, and they don't really have a background of being out in the woods and being, driving tractors and and working dogs and all that kind of stuff. They have a background that's, they've come in from the suburbs or urban areas. They love animals because of what they've seen on TV. And so they come into these wildlife programs, and they don't have a background. So Georgia Wildlife Federation actually has a new program. We've been running it for about 4 years now. It's called Academics Afield, where we actually go into those schools and we take those students hunting.
That is awesome.
And we're doing that both at University of Georgia, at Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College, places that provide a lot of our wildlife professionals. We're also doing it in places that are non-traditional. We're starting an Academics Afield at our historically Black colleges and universities now.
Yeah.
And to really encourage folks to come in and think about hunting that haven't thought about it before.
Mm-hmm.
So
you can at least get the conversation started at that point. Once they have exposure, it's like I'm not going to enter into a debate about the Boston Marathon. I don't run the Boston Marathon, but there are people that will engage in that conversation with no knowledge and no experience at all and try to tell people how to run it. And when we can set up a program where we are giving people some perspective that they can actually make real life decisions based on their experience, we're going to be ahead.
Yeah, I think, and so as I said, I find that our agency really it's run by people that are hunters and anglers.
Mm-hmm.
When I talk to the fisheries chief is a fisherman. When I talked to the game chief, actually at one point we had a game chief or a fisheries chief that was much more of a hunter than a fisherman. And because when he was in school, they told him, said, if you like to hunt, you better be a fisheries guy so that you can work hard during the summer and you don't have to work as hard during hunting
brilliant.
season.
That's brilliant.
But so having said all of that, it really is these folks that are running our agency are hunters and anglers.
Mm-hmm.
And even when they hire those non-hunters into the agency, they pretty quickly inculcate them into the culture.
Yeah.
And so it here in Georgia, we are blessed.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the case across the country.
And I would watch this play out. Hunters a lot of times will point at game wardens and say, well, they're anti-hunter. And nothing could be further from the truth. From 30 years of my experience, even today with the newer officers coming on, we have younger people who've not been exposed to hunting, but they have a deep passion and they have a good understanding of that. And I always told people, and the same is true for biologists and things, the biologist side of this is we're working for something that we're passionate about. Mm-hmm. We're working, if I was just a police officer, I find no common ground with the guy that's running the meth house. It's not like in my spare time, I'm a hobbyist meth cooker. If I'm a police officer, but as a conservation officer, I'm out there protecting something that is very near and dear to me and something that I do off duty as well as protect on duty. And that's what sets that sort of a profession apart. And I know our biologists, I've goose hunted with our biologists, and we have one that was a traditional bow hunter that they love it. They're fanatical. They're not engaged in it. They're fanatics about it. The problem comes in is when you get bureaucrats who are appointed over them that try to impose policy and things that go against the training and the things that they possess, the knowledge and the experience, just to check off boxes. That's where biologists and game wardens get thrown under the bus. by bureaucratic appointment.
Well, I
Appointees.
say this on a regular basis, Chris, and this is, and we talked about Georgia Wildlife Federation and our role in some of the work that we do in partnership. So I mentioned earlier, like on advocacy stuff, Georgia Wildlife Federation, we focus on what the science says.
Yes.
But if you stop and take a look, I tell people all the time, my job, because I go back and I look at the research papers, and what the research says is what our position is.
Mm-hmm.
The agency has a bigger and tougher job than I have, because not only, I mean, they're all, all the folks that are biologists and technicians, they're all grounded in science and they're all working on a lot of these issues, but they also are employed by a state agency. So they have to take into account a lot of the social components that I don't have to worry about. And they have to take into account a lot of the political components that I don't have to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are faced with a juggling act that's a lot more difficult than mine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why sometimes we might not always agree on everything. But I will tell you that they are always thinking about the hunters and anglers here in our state.
Yeah, that's good news. Well, Mike, we've been rolling along, and we were kind of late getting started because I couldn't spell your email address. But you got any final thoughts? Any shout outs that you want to make or appeals you want to make to the houndsmen in the state of Georgia? What's a good message for them? We're at the end of our legislative session.
Yep.
It's
over. Monday was the last day.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage all of our sportsmen, houndsmen, get to know your legislator. Spend some time with them at home. I can spend all the time in the world in Atlanta at the state capitol, but the most important and most influential people that they deal with are the folks that they see at home. They see them in Sunday school, at church. They see them at the ball fields with their kids playing softball or soccer or whatever it is. They see them at the local sports bar in the evening, right, having a beer and some wings. And so get to know your legislators and stay engaged. Your legislators are interested in hearing from you. You're not an imposition to them. They want to hear from you.
Yeah.
And keep that rugged individualism going in the woods, but join together and help us all at the Capitol, because a collective voice is way more important there than a single voice. So that's really kind of what I would if I could encourage folks to really think about and engage in the policy components, because folks, it determines the future of what we love to do.
When does the legislative session start back up in Georgia?
So the legislature starts the second Monday of January every year in Georgia, and it runs for 40 days. We used to say when I was a corporate lobbyist, it's 40 days and 80 nights, because there are old sayings like, the legislature's in town, lock up your liquor, those things have changed a little bit through the years, but we've got a much more diverse legislative body today.
Right.
But it runs normally through the end of March, can go into first part of April, which we did this year. So that's sort of the time frame. It was designed to during our agrarian period, where farmers could go and work while they weren't necessarily having to work so hard in the field. So second Monday of January through normally about end of March.
I brought that up to set us up because it's pretty similar across the United States. We've got several months here where we can make some real inroads by, if every houndsman would go introduce themselves to their legislator. And my legislator told me one time, he goes, it's not nearly as important for you to know my name as it is for me to know your name. And when we can develop that kind of relationship with them, we've got right now, people in Georgia, you got 8 months to get this done. So this is your Houndsman XP task, is go find your legislator, introduce yourself to him, and make sure that he knows your name by the time the next legislative session starts.
And if anybody does that and wants any guidance or wants to know who their legislators are or something about their legislators at the Capitol, I encourage them to reach out to me here at Georgia Wildlife Federation.
That was going to be my next assignment, is go to Georgia Wildlife Federation's website, join that Camo Coalition so that you can stay up to date. Get to know Mike Worley and the people that are there working for you every day.
That's perfect.
All right, Mike. Well, I appreciate your time. Keep up the good work down there. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today. It's always a pleasure when I talk to you.
Call anytime, Chris, and let's do this. Let's do this often.
All right, you bet. All right, Mike. Well, until next time, you follow your hounds and I'll follow mine.
You got it.